Welcome. Who's not been here before? Few people? All right. What we do each month is have a conversation about a different topic, and the goal is to help everybody get a clear understanding of things, to learn some information, to get some tips, to get some advice. The group's open to anybody who would like to participate and anybody that would like to come and do this. And some of our goals are to work with businesses to all have a conversation about how do I take this medium and generate a tangible ROI from these activities. And ROI is a little bit difficult to define. We're going to do it in some of our upcoming sessions, but you know, you could spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week doing social media and checking in and talking to people and creating videos and taking pictures and writing posts and tweeting, and how much do you do to make sure that you're generating an ROI for your business? And that's the goal of the group, is what's that line and where do I go and how can I best do that for my time. The other thing we're looking at doing is creating a database of all of the information and all of the tips and all of the ideas. We're actually starting the scope of that now. We might even turn it into an iPhone app of some sort that, you know, when we're in here, people can put in the tips and put in the advice and then be able to go in there and look at these tips and look at the advice and say, hey, what are the tips that people like most from the group on Facebook, on YouTube? What are the mobile apps that this group came up with? And just have everybody contributing, ranking, categorizing, and getting a knowledge base of information put together with everybody from the group to be able to do this better and easier. So to create a knowledge base and a resource. So a lot of what we do is discuss the influence of social media and how it's changing the world, and it really is changing the way that everybody thinks about how we communicate, how we interact with each other, how information flows, how businesses are perceived out there in the world. We're no longer in charge of our brands. Our clients are in charge of our brands, and the community at large is in charge of our brands out there. And we're going to hear from Elizabeth Lewis today. She's an attorney, and we're going to talk about, you know, what can people use as far as my image and my words and writing about me and talking about me in social media, and where are those lines? So that's going to be an interesting conversation. Multiple different communications channels are critical today. It used to be that I could run a TV ad at dinner time in the 1960s and reach the entire United States. Maybe, and in the 1930s and 40s, maybe I ran an ad on the Little Annie radio show or something, and a Little Orphan Annie radio show, and I would reach everybody who's gathered around their TVs. And as I'm going around and looking at people and having conversations, I've traveled a lot this week. I went to a few meetings in different places around the country with clients, and so I got to sit in airports and I got to sit in restaurants and got to see how people do these things. And it's funny, if you're sitting in a group and one person, or even if you're sitting in a crowd, right? We don't need to even be talking, and one person pulls out their phone and they start doing this, everybody starts pulling out their phone and starts saying, oh, I do that too. And it's kind of one of these neat things. So I was watching that at a lot of different places this week, and it's universal. It doesn't matter where you're at. You know, if people start getting engaged with this, everybody says, oh, I do that. And it's kind of an interesting sort of a phenomenon. I'm reading a book now. It's What Would Google Do, right? And it's talking about how to take your brand and how to take your company and how to take your communications and how to take your thought and just expanding it beyond how you would normally think. And one of the phrases in there was advertising should be your last priority. Advertising is only a byproduct of not having enough friends yet. Okay, and I thought that was kind of perfect for our group here. I met with a client last week, and we talked about their advertising and their media, and they spend maybe, you know, let's call it $150,000 or $200,000 a year on Yellow Pages ads, and they got a new director of marketing, and he said, I couldn't sign off on this. I think it's just things that we've always done in the past. And he said, what's your take on this? And I said, well, I don't think it works like it used to work anymore, right? And he said, so do you think that we should stop advertising? And that's a dubious question to ask a marketing person, because I don't want to be the one that causes something to happen, right? You know, and I said, I don't know how to answer that just yet, but I said, that's the way it's heading for sure. You know, we need to engage, and we need to attract, and we need to build a community around our brand. And, you know, if somebody writes a comment about something great that I do and I'm involved with your company, that one comment now can reach the entire world. And so I think as marketers, as people that want to use these tools to do marketing, our job is not maybe to say, should I do advertising or not, but it's to say, what kind of tools and what can I do, number one? What can I do, number one, so that people write those kinds of comments that I would want the world to see? That's got to be happening on a regular basis. And then number two, how can I create my community so that their comments do reach the world all the time? And I was thinking a lot about this. If I could find a way to do that consistently, and there were 10 people a day that were telling everybody they knew how wonderful I am and what a great business I am and how fantastic it is to work with me and what a great result they got from doing so. And I could get it to a point where those comments reached the entire world, and where they were searchable and where they were indexable, and where somebody went out to Google and they did a search and all they saw was all of these people who gave me money saying how wonderful I was, and that's what the result was under the search term. I don't think you'd need to advertise anymore. Right? And so this weekend, I want to encourage you guys to think about, wow, what am I doing with each interaction and each conversation that would make somebody want to write a comment like that? And then number two, what am I providing in the way of getting that out there and having that happen? And number three, am I listening for that? And am I watching that? And am I monitoring that? Because frankly, if you could do those things, you wouldn't have to advertise. Business would just be there, right? So that's kind of a change in the world, huh? Big shift. How do you do that? And so we'll talk a lot more about that, because I think that's kind of a mission I'm going to be on going forward. So I'm going to ask Elizabeth Lewis to come up here. Elizabeth?
Hello. My name is Elizabeth Lewis, and I am the owner of the law office of E.C. Lewis, PC. It's very, creatively named, I know. And so it's one of those things with branding. It's, he was talking so much about branding and how much you have, some control and not a lot of control. And attorneys don't have a lot of control over a lot of things, amazingly enough. But I work with companies from, I like to say, startup to dissolution, meaning that I help them start up, I help them with everything in between till when they shut down. And some of the area that I like working with companies the most is with online marketing. I started in online, kind of getting involved with social media back when there was a company called Friendster. I don't know if anybody here remembers Friendster. If you do, then you've been around a while. And then after that, it was with MySpace, which, MySpace, there's not a lot of people on it anymore. And then now, of course, with Facebook. So I really like to work with companies to make sure that everything they're doing online is legal, and they don't end up with a letter coming to my office in tears and wondering what to do because they get a cease and desist, or even worse, they get something that says, you owe us thousands of dollars because of copyright or trademark infringement. So and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today is copyright infringement and how to avoid copyright issues, or how to avoid people sending you notices that you violated their privacy, you violated their copyright. So with that, do you want to start?
So yeah, I guess the first question is, what is a copyright, and how does somebody get a copyright on something so people don't take their things?
And this is a perfect place to start. A lot of people have heard the term copyright, but they don't really know what a copyright is. And a copyright is an intangible right, it's a right in intangible property. When I say intangible property is something that you can touch, that I know I have a right in this glass, I have a right in this piece of paper. It's harder to say I have the rights in a photo, because I could make thousands of prints of that photo. Saying that I have rights in a song, that I have rights in a book. But in the Constitution, the Founding Fathers decided that they wanted to give rights in intangible property so that we could have creative works being made. So these rights are in photos, music, sound, books, drawings, and most recently it's also in software. So copyrights are in those kind of artistic categories. You get a copyright as soon as you create something. So a copyright, a lot of people are like, oh, you have to register a copyright. No, you don't have to register a copyright. As soon as I make a drawing with artistic value, I have a copyright in it. As soon as I take a photo, I have a copyright in it. As soon as I create a song or I could create a piece of software, I have a copyright. The reason you register a copyright, which you can do through the Copyright Office, is because it gives you additional damages if anybody takes your work and doesn't give you credit or doesn't use it in the right ways. So you don't have to register a copyright, although in many cases you do so that you can get additional damages.
So very good. So yes.
I used to be a commercial photographer, and everything we did obviously was copyrighted.
Right.
And
By nature of you creating it is what we just heard, right?
Put our copyright.
And then you registered a copy.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
And it blows my mind because a lot of my photos ended up in photo banks and stuff like that.
Right.
Which was great because I got, more money from it. Now I'm noticing that people are doing that, but the photo banks are only charging like $2 a photo. Or, it used to be in music, you could use like 3 bars or something like that. And all that seems to have gotten so much wider now on what people are, quote, getting away with. Can you speak to that?
I guess I'm not quite understanding your question. You mean that?
My question is, I'm seeing what I considered from when I was doing that kind of stuff, an awful lot of copyright violations.
Yes.
He's saying that people
Yeah.
are more apt to use these things and charge less and allow more freedom to steal.
And
Right.
probably one of the best known copyright changes was with Andy Warhol and some of the photo images that he used to create his paintings. He didn't have to get copyright.
Like Campbell Soup.
Exactly, or Marilyn Monroe.
Okay?
And he didn't have to do a copyright, he didn't have to pay for those copyrights of those photos because he was changing them enough. Which never seemed fair to me.
Well, and there is, one of the questions that I get asked the most by anybody that, if I'm doing presentations by my clients, is, I found it online, can't I use it? People think that just because things are online that they've entered this area called the public domain. And the public domain is things that you can use without having to get permission to use them. Typically it's older works, so you don't have to get permission to use something like Beethoven's Symphony on your website. You don't have to get permission to use Moby Dick. It's because the copyright term has expired on these older works that have entered the public domain. However, things like the blog post on my website have not entered the public domain. But people will say, well, it's online. I figure that because it's online, I must have the rights to use it. And that's not true. Just because something is online doesn't mean you have the rights to use it. But there are a lot more copyright infringement going on online because people don't realize that you can't just take a blog post from my site and put it onto your site. You can't take a photo that you find on Facebook and put it on your website for a photo on your website. Is this kind of what you were asking about?
But now what I'm seeing is we seem to be encouraged to borrow bits and pieces of blogs and stuff like that. And it used to be that you always had to identify your source,
Right.
but because some of the blogging stuff is so short,
Right.
by the time you identify where you got it, you've used up all your characters.
And there's a difference between using blog post for research and borrowing the full blog post. Under fair use, you can go out and do research and compile information and make it into your own. And you can even use maybe a couple of sentences here and there. You can't use a whole post. You can't use a whole image. So what you do is you can go out and use blog posts for research. You can't take a blog post and put it on your site or take a photo and put it on your site. So that is copyright infringement. A lot of times because the web is so big, it's difficult to find everybody that infringes on your copyright. I've got something last time I looked like 200 blog posts. It's going to be really difficult for me to go out and monitor who all's taken blog posts from my site and put them on other sites. However, you are still supposed to ask permission before you take a blog post from my site and put it on your